Welcome to the Corporate Culture Protest, the podcast where we name things that make work feel heavy and we push for changes in culture that make it lighter. I'm your host, Arika, joined as always by Dr. Chopo and Jenna Bea. Today we're digging into part of work life that many of us dread, the performance review. Because when they're done badly, reviews do not develop people, they damage them. We're calling this one performance or punishment when reviews go wrong. Hi, Dr. Chapo and Jenna.
Good afternoon. Thanks
Hi,
for having me,
Erica.
Dr. Chico.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Welcome. So I'm going to ask the question, why do so many employees walk out of performance reviews feeling smaller instead of supported? Jenna.
So, yeah, and have been stewing over this a lot. And when thinking of it, I was thinking of all the times I've done employee wellness and listening to the dejected, deflated feelings that people used to say, all these employees after getting their KPIs. And so after I did some thinking, there was some themes that I've picked up. And the first one was that in these KPIs, there's a predominant emphasis on shortcomings and not growth. So you won't often hear the boss say, this is where you can grow and, what are your concerns? In other words, it doesn't sound like a relationship in the KPI. And so what ends up happening is the employee feels more judged with no real emphasis on what they've done or their achievements. And so because of this, Arika, when it comes across that way, then these employees feel controlled. In other words, the KPI can feel like a surveillance and not actual support. In other words, I think the purpose of this KPI is to control me, not to support me or connect with me, or not a kind of a two-way conversation. It feels like basically a control mechanism. And because of that, what you then see in terms of how they present it is that there's more numbers over people. So the the manager won't consider the complexity of their work. They just what they do gets reduced to numbers. Um, and they won't think about the creativity and the way they collaborated. All of that kind of stuff is undervalued. And so what also annoys them, along with that, and I mentioned that word collaboration, is that employees often feel excluded in the journey in terms of goal setting, in terms of setting targets, because the whole process feels top down. And so when you couple all of these things together, what you then have from these employees is aligning KPIs with I'm not enough. The KPI is linked to my job security. If I don't do well, I won't get a bonus. And so what these KPIs do is they trigger fear of failure and no feelings of can I improve? In other words, people align what can end up happening psychologically is that you align what you do with who you are. And it's because of how the KPIs are presented. And overall, these employees just don't feel heard. You're just a metric, and either you scored well or you scored low, but there's no real humanity. And that, Arika and Dr. Chipo, is deeply concerning.
Mm,
Yeah, that's
mm,
true. It feels like judgment. It doesn't feel like guidance.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what, in other words, a judgment and no relationship. Very top down, very sort of old school, high school, sort of 3 or 4 decades ago kind of thing. You remember those days? And so you feel there's no relationship. It's top down. You feel like a number on a spreadsheet. And so because of that, when your humanity is not seen, when your effort is not seen, and only the results are seen, it can feel like my day-to-day work here is not seen. I'm not seen, heard, or valued. I'm just uh, I'm just here to produce a result, and everything that happens in between is inconsequential or incidental. And there's something sad about that because you don't see the humanity in the person. And
mm.
that's sad, you know? Yeah.
it becomes a moment, like you're saying, Jenna, like all of that culminates into a moment where, like you're saying, it's a top down kind of mechanism that takes place. It culminates in a moment of disciplinary power, because like you're saying, it ends up becoming something to do with surveillance, right? Something to do with then an individual not being in a place where they feel that they are being appreciated for the work they do. And the moment then an institution can exercise that disciplinary power on its employees, it creates a moment where what we often call docile bodies, or becoming a docile body, takes place, because now there's that ever-present fear of then monitoring one's behavior, one's certain habits and behavior in the workplace, in order to kind of fit in or model oneself along the lines of whatever it is that has been spoken of in the performance review, right? And even when you say that, it becomes more about looking at the shortcomings more than appreciating what has been done. That can do a proper one on one's mental and psychological thinking, because now, if we are moving the focus from the positives and now focusing on the negatives, it does something to an individual. Now you're in constant fear of, am I doing things right? Is somebody watching me? Am I supposed to be doing this, or should I be moving in certain ways while I'm at work? Which then creates that space where the idea of your workplace being a pleasant space stops existing, because now you're constantly also policing yourself in terms
Yeah.
of your performance and what you are doing, which then doesn't then is counterproductive, if I can put it that way, because now at that time you're thinking at the back of your mind that somebody's policing you. You're also equally policing yourself as an individual to say, maybe this is wrong. You're second guessing your moves, you're second guessing what you're doing. In the long run, yeah, everything goes south.
Imagine the anxiety of that, just that constant second guessing. Hey, Erica?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it brings us to the emotional fallout. Um, what is the impact of this broken performance review system on the employees?
Yeah, well, when I was thinking of what Dr. Chipo said there, what came to my mind is motivation. Because when you feel that your effort is a disconnect from or not being seen by management, you can lose drive, you can lose motivation. The impact on well-being, when you have this heightened stress and anxiety all the time, you can develop this fear of failure. And remember, when you have such overwhelming fear of failure, that can sort of trump your desire for growth and learning. Because when you have that fear of failure, the fight or flight response kicks in. So every time you walk in the office, you're in survival mode. And when you're in that frame of mind, thoughts of growth, collaboration, it's hard to get to that when you're in survival mode. And so because of that, when you're in survival mode or in that fight or flight mode, of course, there's going to be an impact on trust. You're going to start thinking people are biased against you. You're going to think their evaluation of you is inconsistent compared to others. And then your confidence in management is completely and utterly eroded. And then, of course, job satisfaction. So you don't feel your contributions valued. Um, and so your pride in your work is replaced by frustration, basically. But the thing that I hear the most from this in terms of motivation is that employees start ticking boxes instead of thinking creatively or taking risks. And they start saying things like, I just come to work to get my paycheck. And that's what the demotivation does. And lastly, just in terms of team morale, I mean, when you create this competition environment or this results-based environment, what can happen is that competition can breed rivalry, and then you start instead of collaboration. So your workplace can become a turf war, basically, where you're comparing your results with each other because that's the culture that the company is creating. And so because of that, you're not going to have a team environment. There's going to be backstabbing. There's going to be getting back at each other. And that is unfortunately a recipe for a lack of staff retention, which means you have a high staff turnover and disengagement. So as you can see, guys, Erica and Dr. Chipa, there is a real domino effect in terms of the negative the potential negative impact of this.
Yeah. So instead of helping people grow, reviews often train them to shrink.
That's right. That's right. And it's yeah, and there's because we've got a high unemployment rate. It's right. Do I just leave because I can't take it anymore? You that affected, or do I just stay because I need the money? But then how long can I take the psychological impact of this? So it really is, and that I hear a lot, where people leave a toxic place just with no job because they can't take it anymore. And it's because of that like domino effect that I said previously. And if you see the common theme denominator of that, is that turf war, lack of collaboration, and distrust. When you purely focus on numbers and you don't see the person, you create a wolf pit, basically, a culture of distrust. And Erica, Dr. Chipa, that's where the mental health challenges can come in.
True.
I mean, Dr. Chipo, I mean, maybe you can talk about the power dynamic. When conducting reviews, I feel that a lot of employees will feel powerless because it's not in their hands. They can't control what's going on at that time. Their work
It,
doesn't matter, you know?
it creates a very, very, very unbalanced power dynamic, if I can put it that way. Because in essence, it's even more or less of their word against yours, or what you perceive you've been doing in the workplace. Because what then it boils down to, like Jenna was saying, it becomes a numbers game. It becomes about ticking boxes, right? So that evaluation from their point of view might not necessarily reflect the amount of effort, the amount of hard work, and the amount of you or the amount of time that you have invested in showing up to do your work and show up in the best possible way in your workplace. So what then it also comes to it for me. I don't know. I struggle a lot with performance reviews, because somehow I don't know. For me, they create that opportunity where even bullying tactics can come into play, and it becomes a space where it's their word against yours, and it's them evaluating you based on what they think it is you're meant to be doing and what they think your shortcomings are. What is problematic for me even is this whole idea of the focus on shortcomings instead of how best then can we get you to be in a place where your performance gets better, or your creativity comes to the forefront, instead of, I don't know. For me, it all just feels like it's a day at the principal's office where you're just being called out for this and this
Yeah.
and this and that, which might not necessarily reflect what is happening on the ground with you as an individual and how you're executing your work. I don't know. Maybe it's just a personal take
Mm.
on everything to do with evaluations and reviews and all of that. But somehow I feel it puts one in a position where they are powerless against the system. Because now, I don't know, for me personally, it feels like it's a ganging up on maybe it's just my negative connotations towards performance reviews. I just cringe, because for me sometimes they're not a true reflection of what it is that you are putting into the job, or the amount of sacrifices and dedication you are putting into your work. So I don't know. I'm one that struggles a lot with performance reviews.
I
Somehow
like
I
that.
always feel.
I like
Sorry,
that
Jenna.
metaphor. I like that metaphor you use. Like a day at the principal's office. It often feels like that. Hey, Dr. Chipa.
So exactly, because now I don't know. Maybe it's just me and my thinking, but I really struggle a lot with performance reviews, because I feel a lot gets lost in translation as the reports come in. Because for me, I don't think most of them are a true reflection of what, or the amount of dedication that individuals put into their work.
Yeah.
No, that's true. And I think especially when people are dreading going into a performance review, I think it already gives you an idea of how they feel about it. It makes a
Mm,
lot of people uncomfortable.
mm.
They
But
don't
also
expect.
the thing is, Eric, is that that dread is symbolic of the system that's been created in the first place. Do you know what I mean? If
Yeah.
a relationship had been developed,
Mm,
and if there's a good culture, then your feeling going into that review might be different. The review is the result of what's been going on in the process. No? So that fear of the KPI is often, like I say, um, significant or relates to the experiences you've had in the company in the first place.
Oh, yes, of course. I think
mm,
yeah, we've already had those experiences where you don't really trust the system, then you're not going
Mm,
to trust the review process as well.
correct. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, so maybe you guys can help me out here. Let's try to figure out what would it look like if the performance review was actually done correctly? What would it look like?
So the first thing for me is the guidance and mentoring. If a relationship is developed, if a relationship of guidance, mentoring, and putting trust into the employee, I think that's a huge factor in the process. And when you have a top-down system, that is almost the antithesis of guidance and mentoring. That doesn't happen as much. Then sort of realistic, clear goals co-created with the employees. In other words, to
mm,
the managers out there, when an employee comes in, how often, even before the KPI, will they come in and talk about goals together? In other words, what they want to achieve, what you want from out of them, but not in a top-down approach, not in a kind of authoritarian way,
mm,
in a kind of discussion like manner. How often do you do that? And then effort and progress being acknowledged, not just waiting for the KPI. So how much of process is acknowledged, not just results, and to
mm,
reinforce a growth mindset. Because when they do that, when you reinforce a growth mindset, then the employees feel like they're contributors. They're not just sort of
mm,
pieces on a chessboard, but they actually have a vested interest in the development of the company. Um, and then innovation within boundaries. So not just box ticking, but employees actually taking ownership, but where they're entrusted to take ownership. They don't feel they have a sort of hangman's noose around their neck. You know what I mean?
mm.
And then,
Yeah.
and then the last one is just accountability breeds unity. So high morale, what I found is high morale develops when success feels collective. If you succeed
Mm,
on your own, that's obviously great. The problem is that when you have a competitive environment, you could then think, well, I'm succeeding, but the rest of the people here hate me, or they're going to stick the knife into me. So when you have a success which is collaborative, and when people are supporting each other, then morale is increased double, triple even. So are managers out or leaders out there fostering a collaborative environment?
mm,
Um, what kind of are you fostering a team environment? That's the thing that's
mm,
sort of so yeah. So those are some ideas. Um, but I think to sum up this from my side is that when you have this culture, this top-down culture, is that there's a difference between what we do and who we are. There's a difference between self-confidence and self-esteem. So
mm,
self-confidence is about what we do. Self-esteem is who we are. So my confidence as a golfer might be higher than my confidence as a soccer player. And that's fine. It's multidimensional.
mm,
Self-esteem,
mm,
who we are. I'm worthy, I'm adequate, etc. So when we
mm,
have a system where it's hostile and it's all about your livelihood is based on performance and your humanity is reduced to a number, there's a risk that you can define your worth by your job or by a score on a KPI. In other words, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy based on a result. And that's the part that hits me is the psychological impact of that when those two things
mm,
become enmeshed. Yeah.
Sure. I guess when it's done right, it
mm.
should feel like a mirror of potential, not a magnifying
Yes.
glass on flaws.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's really interesting to go over these performance reviews. Maybe some of our listeners can let us know how they feel about their performance reviews, and maybe send us an email and talk to us about it. Performance reviews do not have to be punishment. Done with clarity and care, they can be opportunities to unlock growth. But when organizations weaponize them, they stop being tools for progress and become tools for power. To every listener,
Yeah.
if your review makes you feel broken, it's not you, it's the system,
Mm.
and the system can and must be better. Until next time, guys, protect your peace, question the culture,
Thank
and
you.
protest with purpose. Thank you, Dr. Chippo. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Guys.